Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Ann Harrison. I'm the Dean of the Haas School of Business. Welcome to today's Dean Speaker Series, co-sponsored by our MBA Student Club, Q at Haas. So I am really delighted to introduce today's speaker, Jen Wong, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Reddit. In her role since 2018, she oversees business strategy and related teams. Jen has been instrumental in transforming Reddit through increasing its user base, which now has reached revenues of over 100 million. She has also played a leadership role in Reddit's effort to deepen online communities. Jen has over 15 years of industry experience in digital media spaces, most recently working as Chief Operating Officer and President of Digital at Time, Inc. She's also held leadership roles in business operations at PopSugar and AOL. Jen earned her MBA from Harvard Business School. She has an MS in Engineering Economic Systems and Operations from Stanford. We'll forgive you for that, Jen. And she has a BS in Applied Mathematics from Yale University. Her recognitions include being named number 4 on Fast Company's Queer 50 and on Gold House's A100 list that honors the most impactful Asians and Asian American and Pacific Islanders in culture. Thank you so much, Jen, for taking the time out of your busy schedule. We're honored and grateful to have you join us today, and especially as we celebrate Coming Out Week at Haas. Woo!
Thank you so much, Dean Harrison. It's really my honor to be here and be invited. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. So I'm now going to turn it over to Erin Brock, who will tell us about Q at Haas and Coming Out Week activities.
Hello, my name is Erin Brock, and I am the VP of Coming Out Week for Q at Haas. Q at Haas was founded over 30 years ago now by 4 Haassies who wanted to create a safe space to experience their business school experience amongst fellow LGBT plus classmates, as well as to develop queer leadership in the workplace and draw in the larger Haas community into this conversation. We are celebrating Coming Out Week this week as a larger celebration of LGBT communities. We also recognize that coming out is an incredibly personal and unique process for every queer individual. Some people may never come out. Some people may be considering coming out. Some people may have been out since they were 4 or 5 years old. We want to reiterate that all of those experiences are valid, and our role here on this campus is to create a safe space for the full spectrum of LGBT plus identities that are here and the different stages that people may be in within their coming out journey. We are really excited to be able to bring more LGBT leadership from companies like Reddit and Jen's leadership to campus and be able to lead this conversation around what it means to be an ally and a queer leader in our modern business world.
Thank you, Erin. Thank you, Jen, for joining us, and thank you to everyone in the audience for joining us this afternoon and spending some of your time with us for what is going to be a really great conversation. My name is Via Valencia. My pronouns are they, them. I'm one of the co-presidents of Q at Haas, and I'll be moderating along with...
I'm Jyotsna. I'm one of the other co-presidents of Q at Haas, and my pronouns are she, her.
Great. So, Jen, Dean N. Harrison shared a long line of accomplishments in her introduction to you, but I'm really hoping that you can fill in the gaps and transitions for us. So, can you share your leadership journey, and what were your steps in deciding where, when, and how to take bolder steps in your career so that you can get to the point that you are now?
You know, it's interesting. I never thought of myself as a leader, certainly growing up and for large parts of my career. I think growing up, I just assumed a leader was like a person who told other people what to do. And I think for people who knew me when I was younger, they probably would maybe be surprised at what I do today, because I was very introverted, very shy, and I was actually scared of talking in front of people. It still, caused a little stress for me. But over time, I'd say I really began to appreciate companies and then appreciate the amazing things that they do, which is, make goods and services that people can use, like millions of people, and support the livelihoods of a lot of people. And I became really interested in the people who ran those companies, and I've spent a lot of time just reading about it. When I've made changes in my career, it's usually driven by a couple of things. And I generally like to say, hopefully I'm moving towards something really positive, although sometimes, admittedly, I need a little kick in the pants, which is feeling maybe a little bit like I need a new problem to solve. So the first is usually I look for something that's like a really interesting problem, something where I can learn, and that really usually propels me. So I'm a puzzler at heart, and I love like new problems. So when my mind starts searching for a new problem, that gets me excited about what the next opportunity is, especially when I've like fixed a problem at a place or a puzzle. I'm like, okay, I've like maybe finished the end of this journey. The second is, for me, and I think each of you will figure this out, I'm really attracted to consumer kind of zeitgeist businesses. I love pop culture. It's like I fiddle with new apps all the time, and it's what I enjoy. And so when anytime I've made a move, I've always stayed in the area of consumer businesses, because I feel like it resonates with like my personal intuition about the product. That's really important. I think that helps me do better in terms of my work. The third is I think I always try to move towards something where it's a very clear lane for me to have impact. I think Reddit was a great example of this. Reddit was, when I joined in 2018, was over a decade old, but and very large in terms of user base, but had no business model. And I love building businesses, and that just felt like a magical match and runway to have impact. So I look for that kind of runway. And then the final thing is always great people. I mean, you work with, you spend so many hours with folks, and it's everything on a day-to-day basis. So, if I reflect on the moves that I've made, it's often been driven by, wow, there's an amazing person, and then there's this runway or opportunity, or wow, this is an amazing product I'm really excited about, and then there's this runway. So it's some combination of the things that I mentioned before, where I said, okay, this feels like something really significant and exciting.
That's great. Thank you for that. It sounds like you're really self-aware in where you can really play and put your skills to test. And you're also pushing the envelope in terms of growth so that you can seek new opportunities and slowly build up. It sounds like the skills of someone with an MBA. So you received your MBA from a school on the East Coast. And much of the audience here today are first and second year MBA students who are about to make big decisions in their personal lives and their careers and what they want for themselves. So what advice do you have for us to navigate this point in our lives?
I envy all of you. It was one of the best experiences of my career and life. So enjoy all of it, I would say. I think it's an incredible opportunity to take some risks and try something new. I tried starting a business, which I was curious about, and I realized I think starting a business is actually not for me. I'm very entrepreneurial, but I'm not that interested, I think, in being an entrepreneur in terms of the 0 to 10 phase of a company. But I learned that by just trying it when I was in school. The other thing I'll say is, I think there's this pressure to feel like, okay, I'm leaving business school. I want to make like the perfect choice for me, as if that's the role or job you're going to have and set the course for the rest of your life. And it really isn't. What I often say is just find a direction that makes sense and start from there, and you'll feel your way through it, and you'll get to where you want to be. I think that's been true for me. And just take some of the pressure off of having the next decision be absolutely perfect, because you can kind of torture yourself with that. I think it's a great time for reflection, which will help you do better at that decision, but it doesn't have to be perfect. And then the final thing is just, it's a great opportunity to make lifelong friends who are truly going to help you, I think, be great friends to you, but also will help you be a more successful leader later. Most jobs in the world, I think, are from people they're not from recruiters. I call people all the time for advice who don't work in my industry, but whose judgment I trust. When I went to business school, I didn't have a network of queer business leaders, and that was awesome to have and to see how, people navigated the workplace with different ranges of coming out and different situations and, dealing with some indignities. Like, it was just really helpful to have that network. And, I think the most valuable part for me turned out, I think, was definitely the people and the time and the space to take some risks.
Thank you for that. I think we all definitely in this room feel the pressure of making perfect decisions. So your advice around that is really helpful. And we will make sure we take it to heart. So that's some of the advice that we should take. What is some of the advice that we should definitely ignore?
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of advice that I've ignored. So I remember somebody said to me, you should have a really, really strong point of view within the first week of your new job. Otherwise, people won't respect you or think that you know what you're doing. I was like, okay, I think that sounds like a recipe for probably not making friends. And I saw other people kind of behave that way, and I was like, okay, that's not good advice. I'd say the second one is I felt a lot of pressure to go through the recruiting cycle and get a job for next September in September a year before, or January the year before. And there are so many, and I felt that way about internships too. And I would just say there are so many opportunities. They're all different, and you can get a job when you're about to graduate or at the end of your first year, in what I call a logical cycle versus, the annual cycle. And so just, again, don't be scared to do that if that's the right thing for you. And, don't feel subject to like the pressure of like sort of the cycles of recruiting. I think, I think a lot of people find a lot of interesting things that are not in the, sort of standard cycle.
Great, thank you for that. Transitioning into a different topic a little bit about just interpersonal dynamics, organizational dynamics. So it's said that Reddit is the most human place on earth on the internet, where trust and authenticity can be found within subreddits that's not typically found in other online communities. So I'm curious about your thoughts about what is it about Reddit that's made the online culture manifest in this way? And have you ever tried to embed these lessons into how you lead Reddit as an organization?
Yeah, it's a great question. I do believe Reddit is the most human place on the internet. And actually, one of our platform values is, remember the human. Because Reddit is, it's a technology company, but it is really powered by humans. And everything on Reddit is driven by the creativity, the passion, the generosity of users and moderators on the platform. And the platform, the values on the platform are totally reflected in the company. So, for example, our communities really value open expression and discussion. They value transparency. They value authenticity. They value privacy. And these are all things that, as a company, we also reflect in everything we do. We built an advertising business. It's different than that of our peers. It deeply respects privacy. We've been able to build a business in harmony with our values. We're very thoughtful about that. Net neutrality, something we believe in. We don't violate that for our business. So, I think we have one of the things I love about working at Reddit, and what I love about Reddit, the platform, is that I think it is a very, very values-driven both company and platform. And that, I think, is such a clear North Star in helping to make the right decisions that I think has sustained the business for 17 years at this point. And I think that allows us to, you always make mistakes along the way, but for the most part, we have these guiding principles that allow us to really make sure that we're always in line with our community, who we treat as equal partners in everything we do. And that's very, very different than a lot of companies. We have a living, animate set of people who we consult on product and things that we do because we value their perspective so much. That's pretty uncommon and pretty unusual, but it is woven into the way we work.
Interesting. That kind of leads us to my next question, which is this year and the last few years, we've definitely seen an increased scrutiny on social media platforms with respect to hate speech. How do you think about balancing free speech and harmful content? And what key decisions have you taken that has successfully worked for Reddit through the years?
Yeah, I mean, look, health and safety of the platform are incredibly important to open expression, right? If it's not safe, you can't have that open discussion. And our mission is to bring community, belonging, and empowerment to everyone in the world. And that means we have to help our users build communities that reflect these values and respect civil discourse and human dignity in order to allow these conversations to happen. So, over the years, we've developed policies and made decisions, that try to make clear what's allowed and not allowed on our platform. And, every platform handles moderation differently. We're very, very different. For those who use Reddit, you may know, it may not be obvious, but we have these layers. So obviously we have policies. Most of our peers have site-wide policies that we enforce. What's different about Reddit is we have signals from our community up and down. And down is really valuable because it tells you if something is offending people or wrong or deemed unsavory, and it syncs it in terms of its visibility. Everybody gets a vote. And you don't get any, you don't have a follower-driven model. So there's no equity that makes a single post boosted above anybody else's. It simply votes. It starts at 0 and you either go up or down. So the idea sinks or swims on itself, doesn't matter who wrote it. It was very, very different. And then on top of it, we have a volunteer group of moderators who get, help communities write their own rules that sit on top of our rules. And they are our partners in moderating all the communities. So very, very different than our peers. I think very scalable and very good at handling nuance so that communities can handle the conversations and the language the way that makes sense for them, right? So not a one-size-fits-all like manual for the pizza community, the news community, the Ukraine community. Like everybody gets to set their rules up for what works for them. This has worked for us. It's what I'd say is, it's worked for us. We can always do better. But overall, I think this has been scaling really, really well. It is one of the toughest problems out there to balance these two things. These are the toughest decisions that we make. But the good news is we make them in concert with our community.
Yeah, I'd really like to expand on this idea of adaptive leadership and reading the signals that you get from the Reddit community, whether it's positive or negative. So here at Haas, one of our values and one of our defining leadership principles is to question the status quo. So when making executive level decisions, how do you bridge or balance tactical decision making that can be used or made using a logical framework with more creativity, which I think is something that ties into your last response. But I'm curious if you can dig into that a little bit deeper for us. Yeah,
it's a great question. I can speak from my reference point, which is I think I'm both an intuitive person, but I'm very fact-based. And for me, it's very hard to go against my gut. It is extremely uncomfortable. So when the two don't match, It is really, really difficult, and I got to sleep on it. And I really have to understand why the two are in conflict. What I find is that when you're in a situation where you're growing and building something, like a new company, a new product, things are always vague. They're ill-defined. Strategy is more often than not ill-defined. So that's where I think experience and intuition are important to have conviction to move through a situation where there's no data, right? You're building something and imagining something that didn't exist. In other decisions, you can be more fact-based because it's more defined. Sometimes, defined investments in, let's say, a piece of technology or a factory, et cetera, that's very different. That can be somewhat more computational and more fact-based. So you might lean on that versus intuition. What I'd say is, in all cases, I really believe in operating from first principles. And so, for example, at Reddit, we start with our values and what's right for Reddit. And based on the values, what are the decisions that we would make? And that's a very scalable way to propagate a way of thinking to a lot of people who have, now almost 2,000 people who have to make decisions about product and our business. I find that when having first principles, what happens is everybody has clarity on what the right decision is for the most part, and you can scale, and you aren't swayed by immediate tactical, emotional kind of exogenous variables, because you have a clear sense of at the core what your North Star is and how this decision or principle or value will tie to your North Star.
Very interesting. I definitely I have read a lot about first principles decision model and decision making, and I think that even applies to life, how you think through big decisions in your life. That kind of goes to my next question. Reddit's ad revenue, as we heard, has grown to over $100 million, and Reddit, compared to other social media platforms, has weathered the pandemic really well. Some of the others have seen a decline in user base recently. So I was curious to know, what decisions do you think have helped Reddit's success in the past few years? And as a digital marketing media expert yourself, how do you see the interaction between users and online communities changing in the future? And as an addition to that, one last question is, what keeps you up at night with regard to that in the future?
Okay, let me take them one by one. Good questions. Okay, decisions that have helped Reddit's success. One is the one we just talked about. I think being very clear about our values, which, by the way, we had, but we didn't codify. So we actually went through the process of codifying our values and writing sets of principles, both internal ones, leadership principles, privacy principles, enhancing our values down to a more usable, set of guidance. So clarifying our values and our stance on things like, privacy principles, I think from a first principles perspective has really helped us scale and define some of the strategies. Number two, we didn't have a business when we joined. We had to decide on a business model. Our decision was to build an advertising business first. We do have an aspiration for a consumer-driven model. Ad businesses are scalable, they're fast, and we built it in harmony with our platform and our values. And I think that's worked really well for us, because I do think in the world of digital marketing, people do care about privacy. They care about performance, but they also care about privacy. They care about who they're working with, et cetera. And so that, I think, has done really well for us. We have a really differentiated kind of proposition. And then number three, I'd say, what Reddit is this amazing place where people have conversations on every topic. And if you use Reddit, you know that the quality of content, there's just things on Reddit you could not find anywhere else. Like, I can get advice on my white blunt carrots. I don't know what happened with them, but someone's going to help me with that. And so we never want to sacrifice content quality for growth. right? There are certain types of content that can get growth and engagement, but I would call it maybe more disposable. That's not what we value. We value quality content, and a lot of it's written and thoughtful. So I think we've done a good job of balancing those two things, which again sustains our values. Okay, so second question was interaction between users and communities. Okay, I think this is an area where, to date, if you look at Reddit, users in communities are basically having altruistic conversations. They're helping each other out. They're answering questions. I'm getting help with my gardening or my failed pizza dough. Like that is a lot of what's happening, right? There's discussion about news, point, counterpoint, et cetera. Over time, I think what will happen is communities will become increasingly influential and powerful, and they will have more influence, from online to offline. Users and communities and users to users can have an exchange of value or a transaction that goes beyond the conversation. Maybe they hire somebody to go do art for them. Maybe their content is so good that they might charge for it. Maybe they produce a product, that is sold to other people in the community. I think that's our vision, is that these subreddits can go from places of conversation to maybe places of business and exchange, value exchange. Okay, third was what's keeping me up at night about all of this. I would say I worry sometimes about poorly crafted regulation killing the open spirit of the internet. I think it's really hard to craft regulation for the internet, and I think there's some thought on doing that. Not necessarily wrong. It's just that you have to be really careful because there's so much diversity on the internet. I think the internet is net an incredibly positive thing for the world and for people, and we believe in the open internet at Reddit. Not everybody does, but I think the open internet is ultimately about transparency, open access to information. I think is what was so transformative about the technology, and anything that puts that in jeopardy would be, I think, really sad and upsetting. So I think that's sometimes keeps me up at night.
We definitely understand the value of open internet and having a diversity of perspectives and voices come into play into the subreddits and the online communities within Reddit. So right now, there is also a known gap within the tech industry and a need to increase diversity, equity, inclusion, and representation of LGBTQ+, people of color, and other marginalized groups within the industry. So thinking about Reddit, how do you envision Reddit becoming a talent magnet for these groups? What is the level of preparedness you think Reddit is at right now in order to welcome these new team members on board or current team members? And is there any specific example within Reddit that you can share with us in how you've done that?
Yeah, I mean, this is incredibly important to us because if you're a company that serves a very diverse set of communities, it is incredibly important to have a company that reflects that. Otherwise, you just cannot build community and products for a very large and diverse population. I think, if I reflect on where we are in our journey, I think, the win is having people join your company, in this case, join Reddit, and be successful and thriving. And that means advancing in their careers and learning, and probably, and building communities beyond their immediate kind of work groups, and being able to bring their whole selves to work in a very comfortable, inclusive way. And, I'd say across those areas, we continue to do work. I'm pretty pleased with the progress we've made, but I think there's still more that we can do. So the advancing in careers, that's about training and mentorship. I think we've made good progress there. We can make more progress in, having people move through our ranks. And I think we've developed a very vibrant community in our employee resource groups, or ERGs. I mean, I'll just share like my personal experience. We have an LGBTQ SNU group, but we have a separate trans at Reddit ERG, which I'm the exec sponsor of. And one of the reasons why I wanted to work with our trans ERG is because, even being queer myself, I did not feel like I had strong enough cultural fluency with our trans community. And it's been an incredible experience for me, and I have learned a tremendous amount. In the first year that I joined the group, we started evaluating and benchmarking our health benefits, for example. And that was a really important piece of work that led us to create additional benefit that was sort of catch services needed that weren't caught by our healthcare, that we could not see until we benchmarked to our peers and got advice on how to handle the situation. So there's been, a real learning journey for me. I think for us, the community, the ERGs are really important in making us a better business. So when we developed our hateful content update a couple of years ago, we consulted our ERGs to get feedback on the policy to make sure that we had covered, in a fulsome way, all of the concerns that could be out there and the experiences that they had. So that was, that's a real business value from our ERGs. And I'd say for me personally, I took a lot of, I also sponsor our Reddit Asian network. I took a lot of comfort in being able to talk to Asian SNUs when there was the rise of Asian hate. And I personally experienced some really offensive situations in Manhattan. And, it was, I think we did, it was really powerful for me to be able to just be open with people who were experiencing that and to be allowed to share that with our whole company. So, I think Reddit, the platform, is diverse. I think Reddit, the company, continues to work on diversity and inclusion and belonging, for ourselves as a company. It's not perfect, but I think we've made good progress here.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that with us and being so open about those experiences. I think one of the things that we sometimes forget when we are busy and in business school is there's a whole human and personal component to the work that we need to do. So thank you for sharing both sides in terms of how you approach your work in your career and also the real human and life situations that you encounter as an executive. So this brings me into my next question. So another defining leadership principle that we have at Haas is students always. And sometimes we have to be students always through difficult situations or through great situations. So what is the most difficult situation you've encountered in your career thus far, and how did you navigate it? And I guess I'll follow up with that so that we end on a positive note. What's the best thing you've encountered so far as well?
Good question. I went through a pretty major career change during business school. I kind of used business school as my reset button. So I think I was almost despondent before realizing how to get out of it. So I was a quantitative undergraduate major. I didn't know a lot about jobs, and I took a job from a book that recruited math and physics majors to do quantitative finance. And I was like, okay, this is a reasonable job. I have a lot of loans. Sounds about right. Keeps me above water in New York. And I do the job. It was fine. But years on, I got deeper into it. It's called year 4 and 5. And I was thinking, I just don't want to do this for the rest of my life. This is just not me. I don't even think I want to do this level of quantitative work, even though I'm a quantitative person. I think I want to do something that's closer to what I love and care about, which is something in the consumer world. I think I want to be with more creative people. I think I want to spend more time in teams. I mean, all of this, but I just didn't know how to get out of it. I just felt kind of, in that. And I met someone who said to me, you can always hit the reset. different ways to hit the reset button. And one of the ways I'm going to hit the reset button, he was doing this for himself, was like, I'm going to go to business school and I'm just going to use that to hit the reset button. And I said, well, I want to do that. And so, this was something like October, and I did it. I took GMAT, applied to school, and did that. And when I got to business school, one of the things I did that summer for internships is I didn't take any of the standard internships. I got paid hourly to work at HBO. Moved to LA. I just wanted to try what it was like to work in the entertainment industry and like production finance, like something very different. And it was the best thing that I ever did. I just started a learning process for myself. And, obviously, after business school, I realized I didn't know anything about businesses. I worked at McKinsey for a little bit, but only in media and entertainment. I deleted my financial background in the database so that people only knew that I worked at HBO. And I just sort of forcibly pushed myself into learning about consumer, and media. And what I got out of that was a real conviction that, like, you know what, I can get myself out of anything. Like, I had just gone down a route that I really didn't want. And I sort of now I often say, like, I'm exactly where I want to be. And if I fell into a place where I wasn't, I just feel like I could do it again. And I just say that to all of you because you're not going to make perfect decisions. You might end up in that position, and you can totally pivot yourself toward something that you care about. That was probably, the most difficult kind of pivot that I've had in my career. And I think, there's a moment there that I just didn't know what to do. So I just kind of figured it out. The best, I've had so many bests. The reason why I say that is because so much of the best things are, I think, when you set a goal and you want to meet it, and you meet, you round the corner to the end of the year when you said, like, I said I'm going to do this, and at the end of the year you're like, wow, we did this. And it's not just you, it's you and the team that you built to do that, and it's like the best feeling. I'm a pretty goal-oriented person. I love, like, being able to deliver what I said I was going to do, even when it was just like a thing on a piece of paper or an idea. And I find that incredibly rewarding. And so that shows up, hopefully every year, but not always. But you find those in pockets all the time. So that's always a joy for me. It gives me a lot of energy.
Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your wisdom with us. I think we are going to open to Q&A now.
Thank you so much, Jen. This has been so great. We'll open it up to Q&A. If you'd like to ask a question, you can go to the mics and speak into the mic. That way people who might be listening to this online can hear the question. So thank you again for this. Do we have a first question?
Hi, Jen.
Oh, and please identify yourself.
My name's Peter. I just wanted to say, for you and the Reddit community, thank you so much. Like, Reddit's really been kind of a rock for me these past 10 years, and it's just like provided a platform for me to explore all my personal interests, meet some of my most significant relationships in my life, including my partner of like 4.5 years. Just many great things and a lot of time spent and wasted. So on that note, what are some, let's just say, like, motivating trends, data, like observations you've had in the past few years on how like Reddit's really fostering this community inclusiveness and helping people form relationships they might not have been able to make otherwise?
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing that. It's always so meaningful to hear that, and that's why I come to work, because we can have that kind of impact. If I look at the last couple of years, it's actually been fascinating. Like, if you just go to the beginning of the pandemic, we had this r/coronavirus community that in 2019, it started to grow. By January was maybe, I think, 500,000 people, and by April was 3 or 4 million people. And if you remember at the beginning of the pandemic, we were getting conflicting advice from lots of different places because it was just an unknown situation. Do you wear a mask or not? Is it hand washing? Is it airborne, et cetera? And I found that to be one of the most helpful subreddits where people were just sharing information, being critical of information as well, but trying to sift through a lot of uncertainty. And I thought that was incredibly helpful. We saw people flock to that. But then beyond that, we went through this period where everybody was at home and I think really seeking community, feeling lonely and trying to find other people to just interact with. And we saw this like flourish. People were dealing with like, hey, I'm home with roommates and we don't get along. What do we do? Hey, I'm home with kids and I'm homeschooling, I'm doing remote schooling. Help me. What does that look like? Hey, I now have to cook for, every single meal each day. Help. How do I batch cook? I mean, it was really incredible to see, I think, that humanity emerge. And, then I think that's continued. A lot of people discovered Reddit during that time. And then if you look at the last year, I mean, I think one of the things that's wild about Reddit is like, we have everything from Wall Street bets, which are people, at the heart of it, I think it is a group of people who want to participate in the financial system and are trying to help other people participate in financial markets, which can be kind of opaque and difficult for people to participate in, to anti-work, right? Which is a different philosophy in thinking about the workplace and work-life balance and how to engage in the workplace. And we have that whole range of everything in between. Those are really two, you could say very different, but very big trends that we see on the platform. What I would say about Reddit is we tend to see things very early because it's a safe space for people to explore new ideas and find other people who have that idea. And then that becomes, it sort of trickles from Reddit into the mainstream. We saw this with gender fluidity. The discussion started on Reddit so long ago, and I think this has become a change in our general society and discussion. But it really started so long ago on Reddit, and we have so many of these threads. EVs, another one, early thread, early believers in Tesla, decentralization in crypto. Really early believers in blockchain. So I think Reddit is really special in terms of calling cultural trends early and then also creating a place where people can just find other like-minded people and give them solace and comfort and belonging.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Do we have other questions?
Hello, my name is Anna, and I'm a current undergraduate here at Berkeley. I've been using Reddit since May of 2017, so over the past few years, I've really been able to see Reddit grow as a community. Something I've noticed about Reddit, different pieces of artworks on a shared canvas. I was wondering, how has this idea of people coming together to achieve a common goal helped strategize Reddit's growth in the future?
That's a great question. I can tell you really understand Reddit. Our place, I think, is it's this example where you get a pixel and you basically make this collective piece of art. And in order to do it, you have to coordinate with other people. So if you want to make a Canadian flag, you got to find the other people who own the cells in order to tell them which ones to make red or white, for example. And it's what we call positive brigading. Like brigading is mostly a negative term online, but it's a positive form of brigading where you all come together and actually build something. I think we don't do enough of it. I think what you have just tapped into is something we do r/place, and that idea once a year on April Fools. We usually have something fun. I think communities do it themselves in terms of Wall Street Bets is an example. And I think, if you look at what happened in r/unemployment, when folks were losing jobs at the beginning of coronavirus and trying to navigate unemployment benefits, they all, helped each other get access. So I do think it happens, but I don't think we foster it enough. So it's something that's really it's actually on our minds a lot. It's like, how do we create more of the conditions for what we call like, positive brigading? It's a really astute observation.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your answer.
Hello. Thanks again for doing this and participating here. My name is Bivek, he, him. My question is a little personal one. I think you started at Reddit, took new position in 2018, right? Right in the cusp of the COVID and Wall Street bets and everything, and you had to navigate and kind of go in the defense in certain aspects with regulations and a lot of other things. And you had such a macro, like there's a cultural forces in play that you alluded to earlier, and there's other, basically as a COO, you have to look up pretty much a wide area of things, right? And then you're trying to go, public in sometimes this year, hopefully, right? And you have to go on the offense there and try to see how to, navigate the financial implications and, monetize and all that. As an MBA grad, or as an MBA student and first year myself, and an avid follower of r/MBA, how do you, or what advice do you think, what advice would you give to us who is aspiring to be, in a leadership position someday and would need to have that level of macro and micro understanding of, the finance, the culture, all different aspects, right? And what can we do right now to kind of get a head start and, to prepare ourselves?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. I'll offer a couple thoughts. One is I talk to a lot of people. And I don't just talk to senior people or people in my industry. I talk to a lot of different people outside my industry, people on our teams, people at different tenures. I find all of those conversations incredibly informative on everything from what's happening in the workplace to macro, view of how consumers are feeling and formulating my view on, maybe what the outlook might be for our business. So I say, talk to a lot of people because it just continues to give you perspective. I also read a lot, and I read a lot, again, outside of business books, et cetera, big philosophy, history. I find it incredibly helpful because there's always nuggets and ideas in there that you pick from that help you in your day-to-day. You'll be surprised. I'm reading, I've reread Plato, The Republic, and there were just things in there about misinformation. I was like, this is fascinating. That's a really helpful nugget for to think about. So that's the second thing I would say. And the third I would say is if you put yourself always in a learning mindset and just assume like I have so much to learn about anything. You will find that you can learn from like anything, those conversations, from books, from anything that you see that improves how you are. If you're willing to question what you do today and try to make it better by bringing in other pieces, I find that incredibly helpful. And I've observed that a lot of the leaders that I admire, they're really learning personalities. They are willing to question everything they've done, everything they believe, everything that they are today, based on other ideas that they've taken in and try to improve themselves. And I find that incredibly helpful because then you can evolve as a leader versus, sort of stagnate or be too settled in your ways. And I think companies and business, it's always evolving. So it helps you kind of move with that.
Great, thank you. So basically student always.
Always.
Thank you so much, Jen. My name is Kai. I pronounce he, him, and I'm a first-year MBA student. So, there's always rumors around about Reddit going public. And, there's maybe confidential information there, and you don't have to reveal that. But I'd like to see, what could be the biggest challenge to remain Reddit the most human place on the planet if it goes public. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see being private or public at odds with Reddit's values. I mean, you could argue that being a public company where you have to share your financials publicly is more transparent and in line with our values, and transparency and openness is actually one of our values. So I could see it as actually great alignment. This goes back to what I mentioned before. I think our values in being first principle oriented. If you're first principle oriented, whether you're public or private or those kinds of things won't matter, because you'll always make the same decisions that are right for your mission. And I think that's a good foundation of that, so I don't worry about it. People always worry, will Reddit will companies change, et cetera. I think it depends how well you know yourself.
Thank you.
I think we have time for one last question.
Okay, awesome. It's quick. Thank you so much, Jen. My name is Colby, pronouns she, her, hers. I'm a first-year MBA. Following up on your point about how you read a lot, what's a book you've read recently that changed your perspective on something?
Good question. I mean, like I said, I take nuggets from everything. I reread Plato's Republic, which I thought was really interesting about some of the foibles of, the more democratic systems. I read The Life and Death of American Cities, which it really left a great impression on me, by Jane Jacobs, who, and if you're from New York, she was the woman who stopped Robert Moses from putting a freeway through Washington Square Park, where I live near. And what that book taught me is it basically said you can't over-architect humans and cities. Cities are living organisms that you cannot over-architect as much as you want to anticipate second, third, fourth order effects from developing a freeway or developing an area. And that the best cities are resilient because they're organic. And people just know what to do and put things in the places that they need. And I think that was very informative for me, because it made me think about Reddit, right? How much should we manicure and guide versus provide open tools for people to create and allow human creativity to thrive, like the way cities develop. So that was very profound book for me, although I read it just because I live in the village. So that was my, surprise takeaway from it.
Thank you.
Well, that was a great last question. Thank you so much, Jen. That was such an inspirational hour. I felt like I learned so much from listening to you. And I also want to thank a lot Via and Joe for their excellent questions. Thank you very much. This has been wonderful.
Thanks for having me.